Have you ever wondered what it would be like to save a wild animal's life? Imagine stumbling upon a helpless creature in the heart of the African wilderness. This is the story of an unexpected encounter that changed everything. One misty morning, at a riverside ecolodge near the Masai Mara Reserve in Kenya, David Osei and Amara Diallo were preparing their campsite. The air smelled of dew-soaked grass and the earthy scent of the African savanna. Shafts of golden sunlight filtered through the trees, glinting on the rippling stream, turning the water into a ribbon of molten light. The two travelers had just lit their small camping stove to cook an early lunch. The soft crackle of firewood blended with the bubbling of the nearby stream. Suddenly both froze when an unfamiliar sound pierced the natural rhythm. At first it was faint, almost drowned by the rush of water. Then it came again, a long, desperate cry. It wasn't the chirp of a bird or the howl of a jackal. It sounded eerily like a kitten's mewl, but stretched out, broken, and filled with panic. David glanced at Amara. Their eyes mirrored the same mix of curiosity and unease. Without speaking, they abandoned the stove and hurried toward the noise. Their boots crunched against gravel as they followed the narrow trail running along the bank. They brushed past thorny acacia branches, careful not to stumble on hidden roots that clung to the soil. The sound grew clearer with every step, echoing at intervals, mingling with the steady splash of water against rocks. Finally, they emerged into a clearing, and what they saw stopped them cold. Out in the middle of the stream, perched precariously on a slick, mossy boulder, was a drenched lion cub. Its fur clung to its fragile body, dripping in streams back into the river. The cub trembled violently, its round amber eyes darting in terror, as if searching desperately for its mother. Its tiny roars cracked and broke, the voice of an infant calling into the emptiness. Both David and Amara immediately scanned the surrounding bush. Their instincts screamed caution. If a cub was here, a lioness could not be far away. But the banks were silent, and the grass moved only with the breeze. They exchanged urgent whispers. "We can't just leave it," David said. Amara frowned. "But the mother might come back. They could be dangerous." David pulled out his phone and quickly dialed the Masai Mara ranger station. On the other end, Ranger Elias Mwangi answered. David described the scene, their location, by the stream, and the cub stranded on the rock. Elias confirmed the coordinates, but his colleague, Jonas Okoro, warned through the phone. "Do not approach the cub. The mother lioness may be nearby. Stay put. We're at least 2 hours away." 2 hours. David's heart sank. The current around the rock was strong, waves crashing against the boulder with relentless force. The cub was so small, its paws slipping dangerously close to the water's edge. Waiting that long could mean certain death. He turned to Amara. Their eyes met. No more words were needed. They would act. David stripped off his coat and handed it to her. "Hold this." I slipped. "Pull me back." The water roared, foaming white around jagged rocks. David waded in, the current tugging at his legs with alarming strength. Every step was a battle. The cold seized his muscles, and slippery stones shifted underfoot. Amara crouched on the bank, her hands clutching a long branch, her gaze never leaving him. The cub shrank back at first, ears pressed flat, a whimper rising in its throat. David softened his voice, speaking in calm, rhythmic tones. "Easy, easy, little one. I won't hurt you." His words mingled with the stream, gentle as a lullaby. Step by step, he closed the distance. The cub stopped crying, tilted its head, eyes still wide but no longer wild with panic. David stretched out a steady hand, brushing its sodden fur. The tiny body quivered violently beneath his palm. He could feel the frantic heartbeat hammering against his fingers. With one arm he cradled the cub to his chest. The other clung to the rock as he pivoted, muscles straining against the rushing water. The cub whimpered but did not resist, its claws instinctively gripping his shirt. "Almost there," Mara called, stretching out her hand. David staggered, the current lashing against his legs, but his eyes locked on the bank. Inch by inch, he advanced until Amara could grasp his wrist. With one final heave, they scrambled onto solid ground, both gasping for breath. The cub lay between them, drenched and trembling, water streaming from its matted fur. David immediately wrapped it in a dry towel from their supplies, rubbing gently to restore warmth. Its mews had softened 2 small, pitiful whimpers. Amara kept her eyes scanning the bush, ever alert, We need to stay careful. The mother could return any moment. David dashed to the tent and returned with a carton of milk. He poured some into a shallow bowl, placed it before the cub, and waited. The cub sniffed, hesitated, then lapped at the milk in tiny, delicate sips. The sound of swallowing was faint but steady, a hopeful sign of life returning. David stroked its back as its breathing slowed, the frantic rhythm easing into something calmer. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The two sat in silence, the cub nestled close, while the forest around them resumed its chorus of birdsong and buzzing insects. At last the rumble of an approaching vehicle reached their ears. A jeep appeared on the dirt trail. Lioness and Jonas climbed out, joined by a veterinarian, Dr. Grace Nieri, carrying a medical kit. After hearing the full story, they examined the cub carefully. Heart rate, eyes, motor reflexes. Dr. Grace smiled. No major injuries, just exhaustion, stress, and hunger. They placed the cub in a padded transport cage, draped it with a dry blanket, and gave it a small ration of energy food. David and Amara watched with relief as the professionals took over. That night, the cub was cared for at the ranger station, rested under warmth and constant observation. At dawn, Elias and Jonas received a special assignment: return the cub to its mother. They drove along the stream, stopping where a gap in the conservation fence allowed water to flow through. Their experience told them a lioness might be nearby. Sure enough, in the tall grass, they spotted her. A lioness pacing anxiously along the bank, sniffing the ground, searching. Beside her was another cub, nearly identical in size. The lioness raised her head and released a deep, resonant roar. From inside the cage, the rescued cub answered instantly, crying out with a force that startled everyone. Its small body pressed against the bars, desperate to get out. Jonas carefully opened the cage. The cub bolted across the wet grass, straight into the lioness's embrace. She bent low, sniffing, then rubbed her head against her cub with unmistakable recognition. The second cub bounded over, and the three clung together, nuzzling and rolling in the grass, a family whole again. The rangers stood silently, moved by the raw beauty of reunion. Elias raised his camera, capturing the moment, a story of survival and love preserved in a single frame. Later that day, they sent the photo and a short message to David and Amara, reunited. Safe. Thank you. When the message arrived, the two sat quietly at their campsite. The screen glowed with the image of the lioness and her cubs. For a long moment, neither spoke. Their hearts swelled with a deep, unspoken joy. They thought back to the roar of the water, the trembling weight of the cub in David's arms, and the relief when it had taken its first sips of milk. They remembered the fear, the risk, but also the warmth of saving a life. What had begun as an ordinary camping trip had turned into something unforgettable, a story of courage, compassion, and the fragile bond between humans and the wild. In the vastness of the African wilderness, under the eternal song of rivers and birds, two travelers had become part of something greater, a moment when humanity and nature stood together and life prevailed.